Can you see me? Am I framed okay?
Well, you're kind of low in the frame, but that's kind of like how I'm used to seeing you, is just kind of chilled out in the chair, you know.
I can
You're
say.
half Freudian. You're like half lying down.
Listen, bud, that's just old age. Which, by God, I am feeling. I took a walk this morning. My right hip barely got me home.
Hmm.
Yeah. There you go about aging. See, that's why I'm so interested in it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, good segue into our conversation about aging. So yeah, I reached out to you because I saw that you're doing a couple new seminars,
Mhm.
and I was intrigued by the topics. I think the first one we'll talk about is your seminar, The Odyssey of Aging, from Hero to Elder. So I spoke with Alan Chinnan a little while back on the podcast. You probably know him from the
Oh,
old
yes.
days.
Yeah. From the old days, he did a thing either with us in Mentone or Minnesota. Very smart, nice guy. Very
Mhm.
smart. And I've read several of his books. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about kind of guiding archetypes for men in middle age and beyond. And of course, in the 90s, he wrote a book called Beyond the Hero.
Yeah.
And so he was talking about the trickster as an important archetype as men go into older age. So, I mean, me being 49 this year, something that, is personally interesting to me. Like,
Mhm.
what does it mean to be a middle-aged man? And in a, I think of it as like an elder in training.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk to you about this and see what your thoughts were on it. Um, maybe what's a good way into it for you?
Well, the kind of more personal than professional. I certainly lived out both personally and professionally the heroic role uh, for a long time. I didn't really identify myself as a hero except in my family of origin. I was the hero of the family. And so I've known that for when I was in my 30s, I knew that. I was the hero of my family. But then the work that I did up until 60, I was still doing it in a heroic way. Looking back, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, I was still even doing my professional life as a hero. People would say, God, John, how many workshops and stuff did you do last year? And I go, 50. Well, that's a hero's answer.
Mm.
Look at me, look at how dedicated I am, look at what I'm achieving, look at how much I'm helping, and again, all this was totally pre-conscious. But once I hit 60, I had a heart attack, triple bypass, and that slowed me down a lot. But then it started making me look at, okay, I'm moving into the phase of life that would be described by many as elder. Now, what I got started doing is saying, what does that mean? What does that sound like? What I don't know how to be an elder. If I am one, I don't know how to be an elder. And little by little, that's when I started researching, reading, writing, going, trying to find out what my responsibilities are, what do I bring to men and women at this stage of life. And one thing it's not is 50 events a year,
Mm.
maybe one a month now that the virus is over. But so that
Yeah.
I got into it by saying, what is an elder? What's an elder's job? And that's what led us to this
Mhm.
odyssey of aging going.
Yeah, and it seems like it's often the case, right, that a crisis kind of wakes us up to
Yeah.
how we've been functioning in a non-appropriate or non-sustainable way, right?
Non-sustainable. That's a good word right there. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the hero a little bit
Okay.
first, just to help people identify. Um, Yeah, I like the way Hillman talked about the archetypes as modes of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
when we're kind of caught by an archetype, it changes the way we perceive ourselves in the world and our role in the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we're kind of caught by the hero archetype, how's that going to affect us in the way our day to day?
Well, I'm going to read an actual definition from the dictionary of hero. Quote, hero is a person who is admired or idealized for courage. That just says it all. And then the definition for elder, quote, the term refers to age and experience, period. The elders pass on their wisdom to the young. So, like, one of the images that I played with is as a hero, I was always climbing the ladder of success, book sales, whatever. I was climbing, climbing, climbing. And so the what I said was the role of the elder, as I'm beginning to understand, is I hold the ladder while young men and women are climbing it. And that's a very different role. I mean, the heroes are sort of looking down on me to be supportive, you know. Um,
Mm. And maybe one of the like the piece of the wisdom, the elder bringing some wisdom is helping the youngster, the heroic youngster, make sure the ladder's up against the right wall.
oh man, that's well said, but good. The right wall, not the wrong wall. Oh man, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's right. That's right.
Well, I mean, that was kind of my midlife wake up call was I was working in advertising and climbing the corporate ladder, making more money, more prestige, more recognition, all those things like the admiration and all of
Mm-hmm,
that, winning awards and
mm-hmm,
going to conferences
mm-hmm,
and then getting like totally burnt out,
yeah,
getting that crisis moment that woke me
mm-hmm,
up to, okay, you're on the wrong track, pal.
mm-hmm,
And then the way I thought about it was, I was climbing this ladder, but then when I started to get toward the top, I realized it was against the wrong wall the whole time.
yeah,
And of
yeah,
course, like life put me back down on the ground, and I got to like reorient and go, okay, what's the wall I want to be climbing here? Like, where do I want to put my effort
mm-hmm. Well,
in
that's a great
rebuilding?
image. Again, my heart attack kind
Mm,
of said, okay, this was the right wall for a long time, but it's not sustainable, as you said. And now I got to do something different. And and that quite frankly scared me because I didn't know exactly what to do different.
mhm.
Um, one of Carl Jung says, "quote in the first 40 years of a man's life, he's just doing research," and he's right. I mean, we were researching life and love and possibilities for jobs and employment and children, just researching. And then after 40, that research needs to turn into something that we can share back with the community, with our friends. Um, but most men, Brian, are not entering elderhood gracefully, if at all,
Mm.
if at all. Um, Robert Bly talked about this, and he and I were at a conference in Minnesota together in '96, and he was commenting on it then because he finished the book, The Sibling Society. Um, and, he was saying, which is what I've said now for quite a while, is where are the elders? You know, and how this is sort of a judgmental thing that he said, but at 72, I'm sort of in the judgmental mode too, people might think. But, many, many men, 50, 60, 70, you can't see them as an elder because they're still trying to be heroic, or they're trying to have kind of an extended adolescence, which we've all talked about before. And one of the ways he, crazy Robert would just say anything. He didn't care who he pissed off. He said, how can you identify an elder? This is his words, who's wearing Hawaiian shirts and sandals,
Right.
and short pants.
Yeah.
And we all laughed, of course, because it's Robert. But, man, when I travel and go to airports or, conferences, there's just so many men and women who just really, really wear the stuff that says, I'm not an elder. I'm not going to age,
Yeah.
you know.
I see that with a lot of adult men. It's like they're signaling, don't take me serious.
Oh, that's a good way. Yeah, absolutely. Don't take me as an elder because that might require more of me than I'm prepared to give.
Well, yeah, I think it's probably unconscious, right? But I
Oh,
think it is
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
But like,
absolutely.
like the Homer Simpson t-shirts or whatever it is, right? The kind of the goofy stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
people are going to hate what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Robert taught me well. So I got
well, it's
on
part of,
the,
look, that before you, let's just say, like, from my perspective, I think that's one of the functions of an elder is to tell it like they see it.
oh,
Like,
yeah,
because you're beyond that hero
yeah,
stage of needing to be admired,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
like,
Good.
like running out of time, nothing left to lose, all of that stuff. It's like, why let her rip? So
That's
please
that's
let her
that's
rip, John.
that's how I've constructed this webinar. Is like I'm just going to tell you,
How I
how
see
I
it.
perceive things at 72.
Mhm.
I was on the plane. I got bumped up to first class the other day, and a 65-year-old man gets on with cargo shorts in first class, cargo shorts, a t-shirt without sleeves, and a pair of those what do they call grocs or clocks or
Crocs, yeah.
yeah. And I just wanted to tap him on the shoulder and say, did your mama dress you before you got on the plane? You're dressing exactly like you did at 10 years old,
Mm.
you know? Um, and people say, well, John, so you're judging people by what they're wearing. And I'm going, no, I'm not even judging them. I'm just pointing out that what Robert pointed out is what he said, the way he described it is we used to be a vertical society. You you were a son, you were a father, and you were a grandfather. And if you were lucky, as in my case, great grandfathers. I had two great grandfathers as a kid. Now he pointed out, now it's a horizontal kind of arrangement. We don't know whether you're a son or a father or a grandfather.
Mhm.
And that does some kind of damage to the culture as a whole when you can't pick out that person, you know. Rilke has a wonderful poem that sort of addresses this. He says, sometimes during supper, a man stands up and walks outdoors and keeps on walking because of a church that stands somewhere in the east. And his children say blessings on him as if he was dead. If that man doesn't find that church, he will force his children to go out and find that same church, which he forgot. Because a totally bad quote. I know that poem backwards and forwards, and I just totally fucked it up, you know. But the point being, in the poem, you can see the man who is entering elderhood, and now he's going on a spiritual journey, not a materialistic journey.
Mm.
Maybe I'll do the poem better at the end. I hadn't quoted it in a long time. Didn't think I didn't have it written down to even quote.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll pull out my copy of Rag and Bone Shop of the
yeah,
Heart.
yeah.
It's in there.
Sometimes a man stands up during supper, walks outdoors, and keeps on walking because of a church that stands in the east, while other men stay inside the dishes and the glasses, and forces his children to go far out into the world, which he forgot. There we
Right,
go.
that's it. Because yeah, that whole piece about the man who doesn't go on that journey,
Right.
the kids have to take up that
That's right.
job much too early.
Yeah, much too early. Yeah.
And then we get, young people in their 20s and 30s who, instead of going out and kind of building their life and doing the research that you talked about, they're doing the me search
Uh-huh.
because they had no inheritance from the elder, right?
Uh-huh. Right. Right. Me search. That's a very good term. Yeah. So, part of this, is taken from Campbell's The Hero's Journey. The stages of a man's life where, you get the call, you refuse the call, you answer the call, but that's where it sort of stops in terms of Campbell's hero's journey. And I thought, okay, so what does come next? It is a journey, but it's a journey more inward than outward.
Mhm.
Um, and so I got a couple of
Yeah,
little quotes here I want to read you. If I can find them.
just thinking, it's kind of like the hero's journey. You go out into the unknown, like you
Mhm.
leave the confines of the known and the comfortable. You go out into the unknown. uh in the journey of the elder, it's like you go into the unknown.
Uh-huh. Mhm. It's
Yeah,
an inward process that, again, if you don't have an elder in your life, a mentor in your life to show you how to do that, how the hell are you going to know? You
yeah,
know?
even know that's an option,
Right,
right?
right. That's right.
As a 50-year-old, 60-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah. That was something I was very blessed with. I had four older men in my life in my 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that showed me individually these different ways to enter elderhood. Of course, the primary one being Robert Bly. I mean, he moved from hero to one of the greatest elders we'll ever know. You know, we'll never see his like probably again. Um, but by being around him, uh, you know, like this is sort of a digression, but when he was in his 70s, early 70s, he started thinking about how he was going to have a good death. And even though he didn't die till 93, I saw him working on that and through that, which is a component part of being an elder.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, an elder, a true elder, knows his expiration date is coming. It may not come for 20 years like his did, but he showed me that in his behavior and in his poetry. And I thought, okay, I'm in my 70s. I'm going to start that too, which
Mhm.
is all linked to this Odyssey of Aging.
Yeah, did he give you a sense of what how he conceived of what a good death might be?
Mostly in his poetry. He, um, I don't have it right handy, but he turned me on to a book back then called How We Die, um, and how different cultures, you know, participate in good deaths and death in general. But in his poetry, he had a book come out called Morning Poems,
Hmm.
Morning, Morning Poems. And if you look in that book, you'll see uh, poetry that demonstrate that. For instance, um, he has a poem called Things to Think. And the last four lines, if I don't mess this up, the last four lines is think that somebody's about to give you something large, tell you that you've been forgiven, or that you don't have to work all the time, or if you lie down, no one will die.
No one will die. I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. See,
That one,
that's
I mean, that last line for me, that if you lie down, no one's going to die. I mean, I remember the first time I heard him recite that, it hit me in the gut because,
I still had chill bumps just now
oh man,
quoting it. But
because
that was him. That was
growing
him
up,
saying, go ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
well, just let me tell you, like personally growing up, that was the thing I was never allowed to do, was not work,
Uh,
because it was only through work um that I was valued, really. And so the hardest thing for me to do as an adult man sometimes is to lay down on the bed and read a book and just relax, just for pure enjoyment. It's
exactly.
still one of the hardest things for me to do. It's like my body gets fidgety.
Mhm.
It's like, what are you doing? You're not working. It's the sun's up. You should be working,
Get
you
up,
know?
boy.
Yeah.
Daylight's burning. I heard my
Oh,
dad say that to me when I was 12 years old. And one thing he taught me how to do was become a workaholic. So
yep.
when I read that poem, heard him recite that poem, those last few words
Well,
just went into me so deeply that I decided to memorize it.
it's like, yeah, that to me, like it goes in, it's like it goes into the wound,
Mhm.
and it's like in Iron John, when the wound, he dips it in the pond and it gets covered in gold, like the
Oh,
wound gets blessed, like the wound is the opening where the blessing can go in, like especially the blessing from the elder. And I think that's kind of like Bly was like eldering
mhm,
in that poem in a way, and he was like
mhm,
sending out those blessings to whoever's got the wound to receive them,
mhm.
you know. And
Well,
I sure felt it.
I did too. We were coming back from a conference about that time that book came out, and he would have been, I'm going to say, he would have been 80 when that book came out, or 85, somewhere in there. And he looked at me and said, now tell me the truth. He said, do you think I've done enough?
Oh,
Should I do more? And I said, you want the truth? I said, if you lie down, nobody will die.
oh man,
You know,
gave it back to him.
you've done enough. You've done more than enough. But see, he started working too on the farm, 10, 11, 12 years old, and worked his ass off as a young man. And, and for him to say, and if you lie down, no one will die. That's his announcing that he's getting to a place of being able to feel like finally done enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a little thing here that I want to share with you. I created sort of a list. I drew a line down the middle of the page, and on one side I put heroes, and on the other side I put elders. And so I'm just going to go through a few of those, and maybe it'll make this talk a little more concrete when somebody hears it. So, number one, heroes acquire, elders let go. Heroes are mostly outward driven and seeking validation and appreciation from the world. Elders let go of demands for results from the world and looks inward for answers. A hero is looking for ladders to climb and dragons to slay. For the elder, ladders are no longer appropriate, and most of all, the dragons are gone. And a couple more. Hero is interested in productivity. Elders are interested in generativity.
Hmm.
Heroes are interested in ambition. elders are interested in acceptance and all that that word means. The elder no longer holds on to youth and the past and tries not to arrest the flow of the river, whereas heroes are always pushing the river, pushing the river, pushing the river. And elders say there's no need to push anymore. And that's where I am. I just don't, I mean, I may not be elder material yet, but I know how I came up with this list was I was falling on the right side of elderhood. But looking at the list of heroes, I can say I did all those things to my detriment. To my detriment, eventually.
Like past the expiration date.
Yeah. And hence the heart attack, so that's kind of one of the big things that I'm going to do in the webinar, and I'll just say it now. The Odyssey and Odysseus had part of that epic poem is a section where it's very, very clear that Odysseus still wants to be a hero after all he's done. He's come home, and Tiresias, the blind man, says, "You're not done." And so Odysseus thinks, "Oh my God, I get to go on another heroic journey and fight the Cyclops and everything." And Odysseus says, "No, that's not the journey." And the quick and dirty version I'll give you is, he says, "I want you to take an oar, a fine wooden oar, and walk so far into the world, and you will meet people who do not know what that oar is because they've never seen the sea. And you're to plant that oar in the ground." And Odysseus is kind of saying, "That's it. that's what I got to do. No ship. No, you're walking. But you're going to take an oar. But when you get to that place, it's going to say, why do you have that winnowing fan on your arm?" Which a lot of people, my age and maybe older and younger doesn't know what a winnowing fan is, but it's what you use to separate the wheat from the chaff, and that just blew me away. That, okay, this is time to plant what we formerly used to engage in battles and achievements,
conquest.
Yeah. So,
in the soil.
How does that feel for maybe a pause to talk or move to the next part of the webinar?
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's been a while since I visited that story of Odysseus, and that scene, that imperative, taking the oar, walking until you meet people who don't recognize what it is. I mean, how does that relate to being an elder for you? Like, what's the kind of equivalent of that in this modern age?
Well, part of it on a personal level is, I have to give up, and I have given up the desire for a New York Times bestseller. I write now like I wrote at the beginning for myself. And if anybody reads it, fine. If not. But the image of changing from a sea journey to walking slowly and going to visit people and places that doesn't know who you are, that doesn't care who you are. And so there's kind of a level in Odysseus that has to humble himself, to say, but wait, can't can't I still sail in my ship so when people see me coming, they'll know it's me?
Right.
And when he gets there, the stranger that he meets says, "Who are you?" And
Right.
there's a line in William Stafford's poem. Line says, "So who are you really, wanderer?" And the answer you have to give is, "Maybe I'm a king." But but so he's a wanderer, and because of that journey, he gets eventually to go back home where he can inhabit fully the archetype of the king. Because as long as you're a hero, you're pretty much still a prince at best, you know. But once you come out of that, and one of the things that was one of the most impressive things that I saw for the 20 years that Robert and I taught, I watched him enter fully his kingship and how his interaction with men and women all changed accordingly. How he treated them. I remember back in the early, late 80s, early 90s, somebody would say in the audience, they'd stand up and say, "Robert, I'd just like to say, I wish you had been my father." And he or Hillman would say, mostly him, "Throw that man out the window." Bizarre. And then as he entered into the king and lover, really, the king and lover archetype, somebody would say that same thing, and he would invite them on the stage and sit beside them and put his arm around them or hold the guy's hand, and it was like seeing that shift was just remarkable to me. And again, tried to show me, how to do this better in my 70s and perhaps 80s. Yes.
Yeah. Like I hear in that him recognizing that man's need for a blessing from an elder. And he was, got to a place where he could actually give that rather than kind of shame the man or make fun of him.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time he and
he's like deflecting the transference, right? Like, throw that guy out the window. I'm not going to be anybody's father. I'm still dealing with my own father issues, probably.
That's right, he was. So the first time that we stayed together was at a conference in Big Bear, California. This was in 1990. And Warren Farrell held a men's leadership conference. But long story short, he and I were walking one day, and he said to me, he said, "John, can you tell me what I'm doing wrong with men?" And I said, "You really want me to tell you?" He said, "Yeah, I wouldn't have asked if I didn't." And I said, "Okay." I said, "You and James and Michael tend to shame the shit out of men at these conferences, and it doesn't work, especially the men who's coming from the recovery side to these taking a risk and coming to these. They're adverse to shame because it's what they had to do, receive all their lives." And he took that in and said, "Really?" And I go, "Yep, that's my first critique." And then of course I said, "Now tell me what I'm doing wrong." He proceeded to elaborate.
3 days later.
So anyway.
What is that relationship? I mean, I sense a relationship between shame and the blessing of the elder, because shame is like almost like the absence of the blessing, right? Like we could look at it as a kind of void of. Do you see that relationship too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Robert, worked on his own shame issues right up till he entered dementia, and certainly I had to do that. But the blessing of the elder doesn't make all the shame go away, but it sure helps, you know. And you know, that's part of the job of an elder. You know, right now, Brian, I have about 5 or 6 guys that are 50 and under, you know, that are all like you in the field, coaching, doing men's stuff. And you know, they're working with me in part, I guess, because they're afraid I'm going to die soon. And I'm like the last of the, at least the semi-mythopoetic group, Robert Moore, Bly, you know, all that. So that's a great honor that I feel I need to live up to because it was passed on down to me, you know.
Mhm.
So.